Welcome everybody to day 2, March 18th, our third round of conversations with people that we deeply admire in the profession. And today that certainly fits the bill as we welcome Carol Jago. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me. Great to be here.
From Chicago, right?
Right.
I should say, I reveal right away that I am a protege of Carol. We go way back when I was a very young teacher. Carol was the director of something at that time called the California Literature Project at UCLA. I've often said, if you early in your career, if you're lucky enough to connect with that certain mentor teacher, how that will change the trajectory of your career. And certainly Carol falls into that category. I was a mentor of mine very, very early. And throughout the years, I collected all her books. And, I've put her kid James through college by collecting all these Carol Jago books that I have, and I have more, and I've given away a million of them. So, we should also mention that Carol is former president of NCTE. And Carol, yesterday, Penny and I had a discussion about, the challenges of teaching in this time and how even teachers have kind of fallen off the reading wagon. And so we kind of talked yesterday about some books that we've read recently that kind of spurred us back into a reading life. And in the midst of talking about that, we kind of thought about some of the challenges that teachers are facing today. I know you probably saw that story in Mississippi where that second grade educator was fired for teaching or reading the book, I Need a New Butt, to second graders. And, I was in Dallas recently and they said, we're not allowed to teach The Hate U Give. Penny and I have done a social justice unit that we've shared for the last few years with teachers, and we're getting a lot of we're getting pushback from being able to teach that. So I'm wondering, from your perspective as a former NCTE president, your thoughts on some of the challenges that teachers are facing with book challenges.
One thing, how I see it is the culture wars are once again playing out in America's classrooms. And what I worry most about is, even more than these laws in Florida and in Texas and in Oklahoma and Tennessee, I worry about self-censorship of the choices that teachers make every day. We know how teachers are constantly weighing this text or that text, this poem or that poem. And that, to me, goes to the heart of why we need community, why we need to talk to one another. Because if we take this attitude of just shut our door, we're not going to solve the problem. We've spent years hoping it would just go away. And one of the things that I've started trying to do is to think about how to have conversations with parents, with school board members, with administrators. Okay, there's some people you're never going to persuade. But many more people, we can have conversations. And one thought I had last couple of days is, a lot of parents are just scared. They're worried about this world out there. And if I can approach a conversation about a book that says, I'm worried too. I'm worried about the world environmentally, I'm leaving my grandkids and we're leaving Maisie. I'm worried. And ironically, it's more scary on their phones than on TikTok and the rest. But parents are braver. They're willing to speak to a school board and they're not willing to take their kids' phone away. So let's just put that aside. We want to be positive. We want to do what we can do. How do you think about it? What do you think about this idea of some of this blowback is about fear?
Oh, for sure. And in my state, there was a bounty put on New Hampshire teachers by a fringe group right before the holiday said, we'll pay you $500 to turn a teacher in. And the governor came out and denounced it, but by doing that, gave it light. So now everyone was talking about it. And they actually had on our DOE website a place where you could turn a teacher in for teaching divisive concepts, and absolutely fear that not just that you might lose your job, because a lot of first, second, third year teachers feel that, but the fear that you're going to have to deal with a confrontation that's not nice. You know, front page of our paper was the head of the GOP flipping off the school board. No one wants that kind of confrontation. And we had in this entire state a sense of that unspoken fear. I'm just simply not going to do that because I don't want to have to face this. And teachers don't feel good about that. This is not, and we're not condemning them, because I think the fear is very real. But I also think that standing together, you know, what an incredible example from Ukraine of we are standing together and we are not backing down is also powerful. NCTE to me is the place to stand together.
NCTE has been defending books since the 1950s. You know, so it began in the McCarthy era, and it has their Intellectual Freedom Center has so many resources for teachers. But the organization is also not just sitting there on their institution. I mean, last week, March 7th, they put out a position statement on educators' right and responsibilities to engage in anti-racist teaching. And the current president, Valerie Kinloch, is a stalwart warrior for this cause. So, you know, teachers are not alone, but you put your finger on something, Penny, which is that who needs that? I mean, teaching is hard enough right now.
No.
Without somebody blowing up in your face.
Yeah.
What have you seen, Kelly?
Well, I mean, I think this idea of collaboration, I'm trying to get to the decision makers in the district as a group, as a group of English teachers, getting to that superintendent, getting to that school board, kind of playing with that message that, okay, a parent may have a right to object to a book for her kid, but she doesn't have the right to object to a book for all kids. Right. And making sure that that's kind of the district's position, and having the, I know in Anaheim, where I worked for years, we had something called the IMRC, which is Instructional Materials Review Committee, in which we had community members and teachers on a committee that approved books. So once we got them approved, that gave the teachers coverage. And then if a parent said, no way is my kid reading that book, then that kid was given an alternative assignment, but the rest of the class was still given permission to read that book. So I think working institutionally to get that kind of support for teachers, I think is important more now than ever. Although I'm with you, Carol, I remember 30 years ago, parents standing in the parking lot of my school, and they had taken all the cuss words that were in the book that the kids were reading and had put them on placards and with a sign saying, do you know your kids read this today in English class here today? So this is not a new battle. It's been going on for a very long time. But I think, trying to get the institution to put, processes in place that support teachers is incredibly important.
Well, and that institutional guidance can come from NCTE. In our case, when we had 3 challenges, that's immediately where I went, the Intellectual Freedom Center. How can you help our district process this? And what I loved is I had a very strong assistant superintendent, Judy Worcester from New York, who said to me, we're going to buy copies for every board member of these 3 books. I'll hand them out tonight. They have 1 month to read them. And I'm simply going to tell them, you can't vote unless you've read the book. And that kind of leadership, like you have the right to say, I'm the leader of this district, and I don't want you voting on what you've heard or a passage. I want you reading the book. All 3 passed through the school board as anyone could read them. They'd stay in our libraries. But if your kid, if you objected, of course, always. We had objections to Harry Potter. They didn't want witchcraft and wizardry in their kids' reading life. And I don't have any disrespect for that. I like it when parents are involved and they have their particular values that they want us to honor. But it is that sense that you're trying to take them from all kids. And especially if you haven't read them. This new movement where they send a list of 800 books and say, take all of these off the shelves, that doesn't make sense.
And see, this is why I'm trying to come up with new arguments to take to school boards, to approach parents, to say, books open up children. They make them stronger. Now, like you don't think about Little Red Riding Hood. Don't talk to strangers. You know, the stories and books are less of a danger than they are a protection. So children, readers can experience things that they don't have to have happen to them firsthand. Because you're not going to change the world by hiding books from kids. I also think something that Kelly, your idea, your point about school having a system, a protocol in a district, and Penny, what you just said about a real district leader.
Yeah.
We who have experience need to help young teachers be able to articulate why they want to use a particular book. Like, I know I mean, even though I taught in Santa Monica, and Santa Monica, is the People's Republic of Santa Monica, it's a very liberal community. But even so, I could do things that a second-year teacher couldn't.
Right.
By doing things, I mean, it have more troubling conversations, and so we need to help those young teachers understand, how did I get that place? I didn't hide. I'd go to the principal and say, I want to teach this book, and I want 36 copies of it, and this is why I think it's important. Like, so before a parent can complain, I've got a rationale for why this topic is so important for these students.
Well, Kelly mentioned one yesterday that he read In Order to Live, which I had to just look up on my phone because I couldn't remember its title. The hazards of getting older. Yeah. And I heard about this book because my friend, who's a 9th grade world cultures teacher, bought copies for her entire class after she read the first chapter. And she said, my school still has a very open discussion about titles. And she made the rationale for, I'm teaching about Asia. I want to bring in voices and perspectives from other parts. And she sent me pictures of these kids like this in the book. We always say kids today won't read. They just want to get it off TikTok. It's not true. It is not true. You put these books in their hands that speak about the world and the things they are curious about. They engage. You give them time to read.
Absolutely.
I think also, one of the ways to get around it a little bit is trying to balance the reading diet in the classroom by having the books not necessarily as a core work, although that's certainly, we're not going to give up on major core works, but also to weave in choice through book clubs and independent reading in the classroom. And so if In Order to Live is only one of 5 or 6 selections and the kid's not mandated to read it, I think it's an argument for weaving in more book club kind of experiences in the classroom as well.
Oh my gosh. I mean, Kelly, this hair is really white. I was doing that in 1975. Like it's like, why is it taking so long for that idea to take hold? Because on so many levels, some kids are afraid of fat books. Some kids will always pick this thinnest book. Whatever your criteria for choice is, including, I really want to be in that group with Penny because she's really cute. These are kids. Yeah. and that choice is everything. How would any of the 3 of us like somebody else picking a book for us to read? Not much, but we like recommendations.
But don't you think there is the same courageous conversation that people struggle with? My department wants to do all core works. I had lunch with somebody on Monday who's having this problem in her school. Only Shakespeare every year from 6th grade on, and only core text. There's never any choice for kids grades 6 through 12. And in the name of this is more rigorous. And the conversation's hard because even with her multiple years experience of knowing this works better, she runs up against, are you part of the group? Are you challenging people who've worked with this population for a long time? How can you tell me that Jesmyn Ward's Salvage the Bones, which was her choice, is as rigorous as I Lay Dying? And she said, this is the difference. The kids are walking in my room going, this part right here, I have to talk about this. They're not saying that. They've never said that with As I Lay Dying. And so what I think is hard is we all want to get along.
Yes.
And challenging conversations
Yeah.
are hard.
And how I've been working a lot with Chicago Shakespeare. And one of the things that I've learned in the sessions that we've had together has to do with, like, we position in our society, we position Shakespeare as the ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else has to compare with Shakespeare. Wait a minute. That's a crazy position. And it makes kids hate Shakespeare, when we put that gold frame around it. Or that we have the conversation, was Shakespeare racist? Maybe that's not the right question to ask. Yes, we want to draw kids' attention to racialized language in Shakespeare, but nobody knows if Shakespeare is racist. We don't have any divers. A more important question English departments can ask themselves is, what are we doing with Shakespeare now? When we've got Denzel Washington as Macbeth, and we're saying, well, but Macbeth was Scottish. How can you have a black Hamlet? Hamlet was Danish. We need race conscious casting, race conscious reading, which is so much more complicated and requires more complex and courageous conversation. For example, let's say you're reading or wanted to see Taming of the Shrew. In Taming of the Shrew, you've got Petruchio knocking Kate all over the stage. Do you really want, let's say Chicago, we take Shakespeare into all the parks in the city. Do you really want a white Petruchio knocking around a black Kate to a diverse audience? No, I really don't. So that's why I say a race conscious. You're putting on Midsummer Night's Dream. Do you let all the aristocracy, Oberon and Titania, be white and Bottom and his crew are all black? No, no, no. You need diverse actors as fairies, as Bottom, as the mechanicals, as Oberon and Titania. So that's the progress we can make. That's how we can make Shakespeare something that I believe kids would be interested in. But to go back to your earlier point, those conversations do make kids uncomfortable. That's the point.
Well, I think also, part of the conversation with the decision makers, I think part of that argument is, and I mentioned this to Penny privately yesterday, that surprisingly, one of my favorite blogs recently is written by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which is not about sports at all. It's about culture. It's really rich. And if you haven't looked it up, I would see it. And he makes the point, that restricting education, narrowing what kids can study, is the blueprint for every repressive regime in history. And I think, this idea that kids are harmed irreparably by listening to ideas that may be counter to what they think. I think the exact opposite. I think that's the opportunity to look at the other side in a classroom in which kids can wrestle with these big ideas. And I think that needs to be this narrowing of curriculum is really, really concerning to me.
Because the narrowing will accomplish what you described, Penny. It's just like go back to the same old, same old. And we have made progress. Publishers have made progress. Booksellers have made progress. Writers are getting published that never were before. We're bringing more nonfiction into our classrooms. We don't want to go back.
Yep. As well as I recognize that many of the young teachers that are entering our profession feel like this is a pretty big lift. to take on people who want to ban the books they want to teach. And just to recognize that, you know, we all have a well of courage, and maybe theirs is depleted by all of the conversations they've had to have that are hard already. And I always say to teachers to give yourself grace if you can't do what your ideals tell you you want to do. And in this time, I know a lot of teachers who are just longing for a time when they can go back to being the primary decision maker and to not hear restriction after restriction. So with that in mind, I would love to hear what you've been reading, because you always are reading interesting
Oh
things.
my gosh, Penny.
I have to get my next list out because I know I'm going to love it.
No, Violet Bulawayo wrote a book called We Need New Names a couple of years ago. Great book. Her new book, Glory, is George Orwell's Animal Farm, set in Robert Mugabe's Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Wow.
It is fantastic. Talk about a pairing. If you teach Animal Farm as a core text, it's some of the most original writing that I've read in a very, very, very long time. Another book, and this is probably for teachers rather than for students, but I mean, I could see this if you're tired of teaching Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Abdulrazak Gurnah's Paradise, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature last year. And the book's called Paradise. It is, again, a brilliant kind of coming of age story in Africa. I always make the case that everything I know about history and culture, I learned from fiction. And
Yeah.
I mean, there are words he doesn't translate for you, so he makes you work a little bit or get on your phone and look things up. But I mean, how do you really learn about culture, about people whose worldview is so different from your own, except from fiction? I mean, but
You have to tell us about your former student.
I was just going to. So last night, was the National Book Critics Circle Awards, and a former student of mine, Rebecca Donner, just won for biography with all the frequent troubles of our days. This is a biography of her great aunt, who was an American woman who went to Berlin and was at the heart of the resistance movement against Hitler. She was beheaded. Wow. And Rebecca has spent years doing is researching. Certain papers have just been released. She found papers in an attic. I'm just so, and Penn also gave her the biography award. So that is just like, and I taught her in 10th grade.
A former student of yours. Wow. That is beautiful.
I didn't do anything. I just taught a lot of kids that you just witness their amazing selves.
I'm guessing you had a little factor in there.
I love that, being a witness, though, to their amazing selves. That's a great quotable thing, Carol. It's a beautiful way to approach a classroom and our work.
And never to put them down. Never to say, like another student of mine, Sean Peters, has just written a middle grade book called The Unforgettable Logan Fisher. And it's a clever, it's amazing idea. So you've got an orphan, a common archetypal trope, who thinks he'll never be adopted because he's kind of neurodiverse, on the spectrum. And then he gets adopted by two superheroes. So he's the most normal kid in the person in the family.
That's lovely.
I interviewed him for California English. So next in the May issue, people can read about it. But I really think that a lot of what we do is getting out of the way of kids, providing those safe spaces for the conversations that Kelly, you were making reference to.
Could you, we're going to put all this in the Padlet. Could you repeat the title? Unforgettable.
The frequent troubles of
picture.
Which one?
All the Frequent Troubles of Our Days by
Yeah,
Rebecca
Donner.
Donner.
No, the last one that you, the last one.
And NPR. I'll get it to you. It's
Okay.
Sean Peters, SHAWN Peters, and it's unforgettable. Logan Fisher. I
Mm.
hope I'm getting that wrong. It has a very cool cover.
Great.
Middle grade kids will love it.
It is impossible to talk to Carol Jago without leaving with some sort of interesting book on your horizon. It's also true with Penny Kittle as well. So to have these two people together, probably the two most voracious readers I've ever met in my life together, has been a real treat, a real great way to end the week, a Friday, as we've kind of launched into these again. And Carol, I just want to say I miss running into you in person. I'm hoping NCTE will happen in Anaheim this year.
Yes.
We'll all get together and hang out again.
And Monterey, February 2023, Kate in Monterey. That'll be wonderful.
Very
Great.
nice. Kate is a great conference.
I want to say
It's
Kate
March.
and the Kate conference in Monterey, maybe 25 years ago, changed my life as a teacher when I sat and heard Sheridan Blau for the first time.
I
Isn't
remember
it so important to know, like we started with the idea that you were a protege of Carol's, but the one thing that I wanted to say about choosing a mentor, because I love how you say it's important who you choose, is that you're not just choosing someone who understands the craft of what you're teaching, because I've chosen mentors who were well outside my content area. You choose someone who's hungry to know more about the work, who is passionate about their own professional learning. And that is really what you need, more than you need someone who shows you how to set up your writing notebooks. Don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
yes. Or how to set up the posters in your classroom.
Yeah, no, you need that person who says, I just read this and this is what I'm going to do. So thank you for being that person.
Oh, you're welcome. You know what else, just to add to that, and to say, I don't have it figured out. I don't, there are not 6 ways to be perfect in an English classroom.
Yeah.
Every year.
Continual journey.
Yeah.
As long as we put the students first.
My classroom was a lot better because I knew Carol Jago. So Carol, thanks again. It's so good to see you again. Thanks, everybody. We have another visitor. Should we pitch it or should we leave it a mystery?
We're going to talk about Respect the Mic, which was reviewed.
I live in that community.
I know. And it was reviewed in the New York Times, which is just phenomenal. So we're going to talk to Peter. And I saw your quote on there.
Yeah, NCTE did, not NCTE, NPR did a brief but spectacular moment of it. Oh, I'm so happy. I've been in those classrooms. It's amazing.
It is. The book is fabulous. So that's on the schedule for Monday. See you guys.
Have a nice weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.